Fraser will be like, yeah, I can attest. He's known me for like 20 years now. And it's like, I guarantee you he has no clue what he's up to. So, all right, you ready to rock?
I'm ready.
All right. Hey, Kate Sheppard, how are you?
I am good. How are you?
Well, you know what? I was convinced by a very bad influence to pour this here glass of wine. So
but okay, you brought your bottle over to your computer. I did not. Mine is still actually in the kitchen. So I poured a bigger glass so that I did not have to go pour some more.
I don't mess around. Like,
No, you don't. You have a great idea.
Well, okay, so I have to go on the road tomorrow for like 3 days, and that means if I leave any wine in the bottle, it might get stale. Is that honoring the spirit of the grape? Probably
I think so.
Not. So, it's like I do it for the grape, but also for the podcast. So,
yes.
Okay. I've had your pod circled for so long to talk about this book right here.
There it is.
It's so pretty.
Yeah, it is so pretty.
Okay, so if you're listening and not watching the YouTube channel, by the way, that's the big thing coming on June 6th, which I can say because this episode will air after that. Hey, everybody, remember the YouTube channel? So we're launching a YouTube channel on June 6th. So they can see Women in the Valley of the Kings, the untold story of women Egyptologists in the Gilded Age, but people cannot who are listening. Okay. So that's why I now read out the name of your book. I will not, however, read the entire book. To you, but that's reaction. I was almost late in like coming to this pod because I was reading the book and I was like, oh shit, I have to put it down because it was like because it's good. Oh, and I get a crap ton of books from publishers now.
Yeah, I bet you do.
They don't all get invites. Sometimes I have to ghost people, and I feel bad about that. Yeah. I'm like the dating site for like podcasts now. I'm like
swipe left or swipe right.
Yeah, you got the right. But I've also followed you for a while. So I was like, Kate's cool. Yeah, it's our first time we're talking, right? So
yeah, it is. Yeah, but I listen to you a lot, so it's like I've already been talking to you.
Oh God, I'm so sorry about
you've
that.
already been in my ears for several weeks.
Oh God, that's usually
great.
Is it okay? So that's all right. Good, thank you. I am so excited to talk to you about your work, about this book, about this movie, The Mummy. I think it was always going to be The Mummy when you and I reached out, right?
Yes. There was no question.
No, and it's like it's Evelyn. Like it's Evelyn. It has to be.
Yes.
This is.
Yes.
I couldn't imagine a more perfect thing. Before we jump into the movie, before we jump into your work, and before we start talking about Rachel Weisz, hold on. Okay, I'm better, right? I should warn you. I'm still 1990 was a good year. You want to introduce yourself to the audience and tell us about your work and what you do?
Yeah, gladly. I am Kate Sheppard. I'm at Missouri S&T in Rolla, Missouri, and I'm a historian of science, but I'm also an Egyptologist. And so I decided to sort of mix those two things together and do the history of Egyptology. And I've been doing that for, since I started my master's degree. Well, I guess my second master's, so in history of science. That was in 2004. So I've been doing this for about 20 years. Oh, and when I started doing history of Egyptology, there were people who were doing it, but I fell right in with this group, with this cohort that wasn't. I did my PhD at Oklahoma, and I was really the only one doing history of archaeology or anything like that there.
Right.
But I fell in with this cohort that was in London because they were doing some Egyptology and archaeology stuff. And so I still am pretty close colleagues with a lot of them, and they are just killing it. But we're still a very small group of folks who were trained in history and philosophy of science who look at archaeology and Egyptology, because there are a lot of Egyptologists who do history of Egyptology, but it's very different than a historian doing the history of Egyptology. You know what I mean? So that's what I do. And most of my work has to do with women in the profession. And so, that's where all my work is.
I'm already in my mind. When you start talking about that, I was like, okay, ask Kate for her friends, and all of your friends are coming on. And there's another history movie involving Egypt with archaeologists who have a whip. We got
So Jason, listen, I know you like Disney, and I also love Disney. Yes. I don't know if you noticed all my Disney stuff back here. But
Mickey, right?
you've got your Mickey. I have a pair of Mickey ears.
Okay.
I have a pair of Mickey ears, and they're Indiana Jones Mickey ears.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Do you have those?
I do not, actually. I'm trying to put Mickey down here. But I am, however, looking at my Carousel of Progress poster, which is right behind my monitor. Right. I used to work at Disney World.
I know. Okay, I know that you used to work at Disney World. I didn't know you were a fan of Carousel of Progress. I have thoughts on the Carousel of Progress. Like every time I go in there.
Let's do it. Let's talk about Carousel of Progress first, because I want to talk about what is arguably the best thing that ever happened in my life. Go on.
Okay, so I love it, right? When I can stay awake, I love it. Because, you go in there, it's dark, you fall asleep, you wake up, you sing the song, everything is fine. What are your thoughts on this idea of all of this progress? Like this is our timeline. We are always getting better because of technology.
Right.
But then also what I do love is Sarah in the first one, and her husband is, what's that guy's name in the first one?
I can't ever remember.
Me neither. But he's like, oh, Sarah has been freed from all of, it used to take her 3 days to do laundry. Now it takes her 5 hours. Now she has all this extra time and she's like canning and other cleaning. And I was like, you go, Sarah. Right. More work for mother,
Yeah, maybe the dad could be played by Harrison Butker, the kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs in the future, right? I mean, maybe that's his next life. He's like, this is a woman's role, clearly.
Yeah.
Like, ooh, God.
Yeah.
I wonder what the Travis Kelce conversation is going to be, because apparently that guy quoted Taylor Swift in his.
But he called it my teammate's girlfriend.
He's gonna. Oh, that's not gonna be pretty.
No,
oh
it's
my
not.
God.
It's not.
I would, if I'm Travis Kelce, I'm like, I'm delivering an ass kicking to that. Okay, to get back to your thing. I love Carousel Progress so much. As a historian, it's okay. I totally buy in on the whole nostalgia aspect. I see that stuff and I am just taken away. And especially the early ones are so great, just so much. I really want, I think on the third one, there's like the old style, like, I want like the stove.
Yes,
stuff,
in the
right?
40s. Yes, in the 40s, the stove. Yep,
oh
same.
My God. Yeah, absolutely. I also tell people, like people who don't go to Disney World very often. In fact, my great friend Sonia over at UNC Press, she messaged me and she was like, "Hey, I'm going to Disney for the first time. What do I do?" I'm like, Carousel Progress is your weapon. It is your best friend. If you've got kids, you're outside, especially if you're silly enough to go to Disney in the summer, don't. But if you are, right, and you're melting, take your kids to Carousel of Progress. There's never a line. You can sit down in the air conditioning for 20 minutes. Your kids will fall asleep. Like it's a beautiful thing. As much as I'd say it's dated, it's really dated at this point in time. I want Carousel of Progress to always be there. So much of Disney right now is located in this IP-centric world where it's going to be Marvel this or this, that, and the other. The best Disney stuff is like still Enchanted Tiki Room, Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. I really love an Animal Kingdom Expedition Everest. I think it's amazingly done. I'm actually getting some posters sent in from that too. There is a blueprint to Splash Mountain to my direct right. Over here. Oh yeah. I'm not messing around. I'll show you after I move the camera around.
Okay.
Good. Later. Not that everybody wants to see my house on the YouTube channel. All those stalkers enjoy. Okay, I'll show you in a bit. You know what? I don't care. Here, we're gonna move this around. Pardon my messy house. Right over there is over the bar. This is my messy house. It's like,
that's really pretty though.
Yeah. Well, I was like, it wasn't. Yeah. There's Coca-Cola in my house, unsurprisingly. It is. It's cool, and we're actually going to be doing a pod on coming up. Well, actually, it'll get released before yours because I want to time yours here with the release of your book, which is exciting.
Yeah, that's very nice.
On Princess and the Frog.
Oh, so Tiana's,
exactly, which I'm excited about. Like Splash Mountain was my favorite, but I understand why it had to be replaced, and also change is part of the Disney narrative. Like they have changed other things and stuff like it's just part of it. Hate to see it go, but understand why. Yeah, right. That's kind of the way I see it. Yeah. People are like, are you going to talk about the Mummy? Maybe. Why isn't there in Egypt? Actually, why isn't there in Egypt at Epcot? Right? I mean,
I don't know, but I do love Mexico's my favorite, and Tres Caballeros is my ride, man. Again, you go in. It's hot out. You go into the Mexico Pavilion. It's cold.
Have yourself a margarita.
Have a margarita. fall asleep on Tres Caballeros,
So
maybe
many
stay on
times.
it if no one can get you off, and
So many
it's
times.
fantastic. Yeah.
So when I worked at Disney, I worked at Epcot, and
Okay.
I sold ice cream and beer at the entrance to World Showcase. So you know
You
what
were
you do at
very
World
popular.
Showcase. I did okay.
Yeah.
And it was part of the college program. 2,500 college kids from around the world living in one big apartment complex on what they perceived to be a 4 to 7 month long spring break.
Yeah.
I was 21. But people would come up to me, and if you're not familiar, there's a thing you do at Epcot called Drink Around the World, where you stop off in every single country and have like the local drinks. So, be it margaritas or sake or Bud Light or whatever it is of the country. And people would always come to me like, where do we start? We start. I'm like, no. I was like, you can't start in Canada. You have to start in Mexico.
No. Yes.
People who start in Canada and go the other way around are heretics.
They're wrong. I was
Disgusting.
just there 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago with my
Oh, you
sister.
were? Oh my
Yeah,
God.
and we splurged a little bit. We just went for the
Where'd you go?
weekend. We
Where'd you stay?
stayed at the beach club.
Oh,
And
nice. Did you
so that
walk
we
over?
could walk
Yeah.
over. And I said, we are not. She goes, okay, so we'll start in Canada. I said, you don't start in Canada. She goes, but it's right by the entrance. I
No.
said, I don't care. We'll go to Figment first, and then we
Represent.
walk around to Mexico. We know what you don't start in Canada. No, absolutely not.
That's
And
heresy.
so, yeah.
No, absolutely. People are like, what? Oh my gosh. We have to do it. You know what we have to do? We have to do a pod of like just Disney, of like walking around. I don't care. Like, it's
I'll meet you there. I will meet
Oh my
you there.
gosh.
Let's go.
I am so in. So people would come to me. I'm like, like you go to Mexico, blah, blah. And then you come back and see me and like a lot. And like, I want to see you in 4 hours. And they would just be hammered off their asses. And then I would pour them a beer. I'm like, it's on the mouse today. I gave away so much. I gave away so much shit, when I was working at Disney. Like
They can afford it. They can afford it.
There were a lot of cute girls who got free ice cream. I don't care. That's my secret. Now come get me. I don't care. Let's go. Anyway, all right. I have so many questions. Oh, you went to the University of Oklahoma. I almost went to the University of Oklahoma when I was deciding where I've got my Minnesota shirt. Yeah. So Minnesota for Oklahoma for the longest time has had a very strong Native American history program. I did my undergrad and master's at Wichita State, just up the road.
Yeah.
Josh Piker was there, that he left over at Oklahoma, and I still was considering it. I really love the campus.
Yeah.
It's cool. Norman's cool.
Yeah.
And they got that dinosaur museum.
They do they have a fully articulated Pentaceratops head.
That's my favorite part.
Yeah.
I love the Pentaceratops.
Yep.
It's great. I loved it. Didn't go, but I have all these connections, have these wonderful feelings. Here's my question for you. Small, short question. Mm-hmm. How did you become a historian? Like, of all the things for you to become, like, and this is a thing that, I was saying this to a guest earlier this morning when we were talking about the birdcage.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was a fun conversation. We got to talk about DeSantis. That was neat. Maybe I called him Ozempic Napoleon. I can't quite remember.
I'd have to take my Pyrin tablets before we did that.
Oh my God, it was so much fun. But one of the things I very much want to talk about, it's actually this idea of like how we become historians. Like, because history is cool. It's this amazing study. And I was telling this to a very good friend of mine, Mike Ryan at the University of New Mexico. It's like, man, we communicate with the ancestors, dude. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is some high level sorcery we're doing. So I'm kind of wondering how do you become a historian? How do you become a historian and get a PhD in the history of science and an Egyptologist? Like, what drew you into this field before we jump into this movie and everything else? Like, how do you become you?
So you mentioned Indiana Jones earlier.
Absolutely.
And that I know, some people, and probably the people who are listening to this podcast are not going to be like, that's ridiculous, because it's really not. I mean, I watched Raiders of the Lost Ark when I was a little kid and I was like, this seems so cool. And I remember watching this. I remember where I was when I saw Indy knock the big statue over to save their lives when they were in the Well of the Souls, and he knocked through the wall. I was like 8 or 9, and that hurt my heart because I was like, what could they what are they losing off that wall that they could have learned about what's going on in there? Like, don't destroy it.
The people who find Indy's corpse could have learned.
Exactly. They'll find it sometime. Like,
Give
they
yourself
did that
up,
before.
Henry. Right.
So I remember thinking, oh no, like, what are they losing? And so I was probably 9 or 10 when that happened. And I got really just into, King Tut, as you
Totally.
do. When my dad, I think it might have been like March 1979 or something, the National Geographic cover with the beautiful
Oh
image
yeah.
of the gold, the
Hmm.
mask. And I was absolutely fascinated. But I remember thinking, like, because I was reading through the article and they're talking about the tomb, they're talking about King Tut, they're talking about finding the tomb. And I was like, but I also remember thinking at that time, like, I want to know more about the people who were working on the tomb. Like, what about
Totally.
them? What was that
Right.
like? What was it like to be there? And of course, I wasn't articulating those questions as a 9-year-old, but I just knew that I wanted to dig a little deeper into there. Yuck, yuck, yuck. So, um, so then I went through, undergrad. I did anthropology and sociology as an undergrad because I thought, I know I want to go to grad school. I just don't know in what field just yet. I thought it was going to
Totally.
be Latin American. I thought it was going to be Mexico or something in the Southwest of the United States. And so I did like a lot of sort of internships and things. Um, and then I was going to apply for grad school. And I was just like, why don't I check and see about Egyptology? Like, I don't know. And so I did, and I found the program at University College London, and I applied and I got in. And so my parents, my dad especially, was like, "Yes, you should absolutely do this because when else are you gonna do this? Like,
Thank
this
you.
is your chance."
Go. Right.
Yeah, yeah. And he always told me to stay in school as long as I could. And so, challenge accepted, Dad.
You got it, buddy.
Yeah. So I went there. It was a year-long program in Egyptology and met some of the most amazing people and just had a blast. But I didn't want to go into the field. Like I did not want to go excavate.
Right. Okay.
Um, so I came back to the U.S. and I worked in a bar for 2 years. And in that time, I was trying to figure out, like, okay, I know I need to keep going with school. Like, what am I going to do? And some friends of mine, this is totally random, but things you can do when you're in your, early 20s, they were moving down to Norman and I was living at home. And so with my parents. And so I was just like, I'll go down there. Like there's bars I can work in down there. Like this will be great. Um, and then I was walking around because they were going to OU. And so we sort of walked around campus and we went into the building, the Blender building, physical
Oh yeah.
sciences.
Absolutely.
And we were sort of walking around down there and there was this really terrible display for the history of science department. It was like old and dusty and yellowed, but I
You
was
were.
like,
I'm in.
I was like, history of science, this is amazing. And then I showed up, I got in and I went and like right before I started, I was working with Stephen Weldon on the ISIS CB.
Hmm.
Um, and so I was talking to a student who she was like getting ready to graduate. She was like in her last year and she asked me like what I was going to be doing. And I told her like something about Islamic science, something. She goes, "Why aren't you doing history of Egyptology?" And I was like,
I.
I don't know. And so like 2 days before classes started, I switched everything around, got a new advisor, pissed off Jamil Rajeb. Um, but he still was he was a huge support to me. I took a bunch of his classes. He was amazing. But he lost a student.
Sure.
And so I moved to work with Catherine Pandora and she was like, yeah, like nobody here does this, but like, let's do it. Of course.
I love
Um,
that.
yeah. And like, to be like, this is a shout out to that department because a lot of the people are still there. They were the most supportive, the most like experimental, we don't know what's going to happen, just try it kind of department. And I on like because they were the way that they were with me, I was able to do all of these really cool and fun and wonderful things. And just super selfishly, like our research is in and of itself, I think, kind of selfish. Because it's like, I'm interested in this thing. It's really fun. I like it.
Right.
I mean, unless you're like researching tragic, terrible things, right? Obviously, it's something that you're still interested in. Probably not as fun as like, let me tell you some stories about people digging up some stuff that they probably shouldn't be
Hmm.
digging up. But yeah, so they were just absolutely wonderful and remarkable. And now here I am.
I can't help it. I hope I don't want to be cheesy, but I can't help but think about the parallels between like say this whole idea of like nobody here's doing it, but let's do it anyway.
Yeah.
And the women in your book. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe there's the sense of I have to imagine, Kate, you had to find some level of like bonding with these women
Yeah.
sometime earlier, right? You
Yes.
write about them so affectionately,
They
to your
are.
credit.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I mean, they're like, I try not to show favorites. I don't know if you could tell that I have favorites in there.
It was like I had to read quickly because I was
Yeah.
prepping
Oh
up
no,
for
that's
this,
fair. That's fair.
and I was just like, this is so fucking cool. I
Oh,
mean, no, it was okay. I have to tell you, first of all, I was sucked in just by the cover
the
of this
cover.
is
I
a
know.
goddamn gorgeous book, right?
When
And
I
I
first got
absolutely
the cover, I screamed. I
did. You really?
screamed. Yes.
It
Yes. I
is
was like, oh, this
so.
is amazing. Yeah.
How did you go to St. Martin's actually to publish to this? This is not a conventional. I would expect frankly to like okay, I would get this from UNC or I'd get this from whomever, right? And this is St. Martin's. Like why St. Martin's and how did you go through the process of like going to or did they come to you like how did you as far as shopping the book? How did this go for you?
So, I have an agent, and
As one
she,
does.
right? Yeah, I know. It was so weird when we signed the contract. I was like, I have an agent. And she's awesome.
Okay.
She contacted me and was like, I love the stuff that you're doing with Lady Science. I don't know if you know much about Lady Science. This was Layla McNeil and Anna Reeser. They had this online magazine, and I had been working on that for some time, doing contributing articles and things like that. And so my agent Sarah Levitt found me, and she was like, I would love to work with you on a project. And I was like, okay, like, what do you mean? I had no idea what to do. And so she walked me through the proposal process and then shopped it around. And my editor, Michael Flamini, said that he like screamed when he got the proposal because he was just so excited about it. And so that's really awesome too. I mean, I cannot tell you, like, we work hard, but we're like really lucky too, because I'm really lucky because of all of the people who have surrounded me professionally and personally with my family, out behind the door, who I said, be quiet because I'm doing this thing.
Don't talk about this, right?
Be quiet.
Family
So,
friendly podcast.
so I've been super lucky with people who
Right.
have been just really supportive and really enthusiastic about the project. So that's it. Like Sarah went and took it to them, and they said, yep. And I said, okay. And I wrote it in like 16 months, something like that.
Yeah. Okay. So I was noticing that, like, when I started reading, I was like, because you're talking about, first of all, you got maybe a bit of a finger from me as I was reading it, because it opens up. I'm like, it's like January 2023, and you're like looking at you're in Egypt. I'm like, really, Kate?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, oh, is your life so bad? I was so
It was hard.
fine.
Hardships, it's the hardships.
I know, right? I kept, God, I need an agent now. I want to go to Egypt or
Yeah.
back to Prague. Someone asked me to write a book about drinking, just drinking. Period in Prague. I'll do that.
Or drinking around the world in Disney. So.
Okay, you know what? Co-author is what I'm talking about. So it's gonna be an edited volume with all of us. That'd be fun. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we were talking earlier. When we started, it's like I knew immediately this had to be the Mummy. But
Yeah.
why? Why the Mummy? We there was really never any discussion about any other movie. Usually, when I come to people, I'm like, hey, have you thought about X, Y, or Z? And people might say, sometimes people give me really weird books or movies. I'm like, swipe left, right? But someone out there's like, hey, I never heard back from you. Well,
I've been
anyway.
really busy.
Oh, I've got so many more emails to respond to. But all right, so why the Mummy? Did you like this? What are your general feelings towards this movie? It comes out in 1999. Do you remember when you first saw it? How did you feel? Because you've obviously always had this lifelong fascination with Egypt. What are you thinking? What are you thinking when this movie comes out? How do you feel about it now? Why this movie?
So I went to go see it with my college roommates. I dragged them along with me because we
That's
were
awesome.
sophomores, I think, something like that. And they again very, they just let me drag them along to things. I have a tendency to drag people to things and like force
Okay.
people to do things.
You
I
did
force
make me
people.
open this wine,
I
actually.
did, exactly. No, cheers.
Right.
So I remember seeing it and like loving it and just being enamored, of course,
Mhm.
with this entire crew. And have you seen those tote bags, or they're like stickers or something that says like, it has like check boxes and it'll say like gay, straight, bi,
Oh my God.
the entire cast of The Mummy 1999, and it's like
I
that
saw
box is
a
checked.
I swear to God, I'll have to send this to you. I saw a thing on Instagram like an hour ago saying this movie turned America bi,
It did.
right?
Oh, it must have. It had to have. I mean,
So it's a
yeah.
perfect cast
Oh,
of beautiful people.
extremely beautiful people. And like even the American cowboy dudes, I mean, they are absolutely gorgeous and beautiful. And like, I mean, come on. What I loved about
Pre-Scarab.
it, yes, absolutely pre-Scarab.
Just want to put that
Um,
out there.
one of the questions that you sent me actually
Yes.
was, what are your favorite parts of the film? Or no, sorry. Is there a moment in the movie that speaks directly to you? And the moment
You have to
that it
call that what
is,
it is. That's called the codfish moment.
the
It's
codfish
our new
moment,
it's our new thing.
is it
Oh
because you
yeah.
go like this?
No,
Oh.
actually it's because when Joanne Freeman was on talking about Franklin, she got
Oh,
really
okay.
excited about these discussions about codfish fishing grounds in. So I was like, this is absurd. We're making it a segment.
Yeah.
So anyway, go ahead. Yes.
That,
So what is your codfish moment? Is there a moment in this movie? Like clearly there
yes.
is that speaks
Yes.
directly to you.
So when they get to Hamunaptra
Yeah.
and they're setting up their separate digging sites,
Mhm.
one of the American dudes, I think it was the blonde one, he's like, "Why are they digging over there? Do they know something we don't?" And the Egyptologist comes up and he goes, and he's got his little parasol, and he's like, "They're led by a woman. What does a woman know?" And
Oh
then it
my
cuts to
God.
Evie, and she's like, "This is the statue of Anubis. Here's what happens. If we're going to find something, this is what's going on." And then, of course, that's when Rick goes over and like gives her the tools that he borrowed from his American brethren. And like,
Mhm.
he's in love with her at that point, and you're just like, no, it's so sweet. So, yeah, that was like my moment where I was like, what does a woman know? I mean, clearly she knows a bunch of things. And so that's it. Like, that's it for me right there.
Oh, it totally like just saying that it's like that's your book,
Yes.
and I mean, like I said, it's just lines up so perfectly.
Yes.
Um, I want to ask you because you talk a lot about how the modern state of Egyptology really kind of starts with this invasion by the Napoleonic forces, which
Yep.
unfortunately made me think about that god awful Ridley Scott film that we had to watch earlier this year.
I didn't watch it because of your History at the Movie tweet thread. Because
It
of
was
that, I was like, thank you all for saving me so much
It
time.
was so bad. And I love Ridley Scott. And I
Yeah.
really liked some of the cast members. I have no idea what that movie was about. It was not about Napoleon. I went with my two kids.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. And my son got really excited about some of the battles because he was like calling them out and stuff like that. But what an awful film.
Okay.
However, on top of everything else that Napoleon gave us, did Napoleon give us Egyptology? Like what is Egyptology? I guess it's the dumb question. And like, what is modern Egyptology? And this fascination.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you the History Channel aliens question in a minute, but then, where does Egyptology come from in our current modern? Oh, that guy, right?
Yeah.
His,
He's the only guy I think of.
listen, if they will pay me, I will say whatever the fuck they want. I don't give a shit. So
It's true.
pay me. Where's Egyptology come from?
So this is a good point. Good question, because there had been Greek and Roman tourists. There have been people going to
Right.
Egypt since, the Greco-Roman period, since 332 BCE, right? So we Europeans, or people who we would now, people from the continent that we now call Europe, have been going to Egypt for millennia. In fact, there were, in the late periods in Egypt, there were Egyptians who
Mhm.
were studying their own ancient culture because it was 2,000 years old by that point. So you've got archaeologists you've got like Egyptologists who are, operating in the 400s BCE trying to figure out what happened 2,000 years before that, like who's building these pyramids sort of thing. So Egyptology's been around for a really stinking long time. But it was sort of Napoleon's whole thing gets a lot of credit because it sort of brings us into the quote unquote modern era with actually trying to look at the script and see if we can even decipher it. And of course, it was deciphered by Champollion and a little bit by Thomas Young in the 1820s, which helped to open up, a bunch of understanding, because now it's no longer a prehistoric civilization. It's one that we can actually like read what they were writing. And so and it also kind of, the Ottomans had come in and had taken over the area. And when the French came in and said, hang on, we want to quote unquote save you from, I'm going to use a lot of scare quotes when I'm talking about this.
Oh, by all means. Yeah. I'm not afraid.
Okay.
But you go.
We're gonna save you from the Ottomans, and then they didn't, and then the British came in and they're like, no, we're gonna save you from the French who are trying to save you from the Ottomans. And so kind of they came in and sort of made it safer, if you will, for Europeans to come in, but it had always been generally safe for white men to be coming into countries that, border the Mediterranean, I guess. So it kind of started there. And then, of course, the British come in and they're like, the French can't have this thing that we don't have, so we have to be there too. And so they go in and they start kind of fighting with each other with guns. And I think in the book I say something along the lines of with guns, but also with trowels.
Yeah.
Because, kind of cheesy, but it's also true. They were going in and they're like, oh, you guys are digging there, we're going to dig there. You guys, they signed an agreement called the Entente Cordiale in 1904, where they said, okay, the French can sort of be in control of the Ministry of Antiquities, but the British are the ones who get to like take the most stuff out. Like they've got all these like trying to equalize things, and if the British are controlling the economy, then the French get to control the antiquities. Was sort of their unspoken thing for most of the 19th century. And they were really interested in it for colonial reasons, of course, control, but religious purposes too, because this is where Moses came from. And this is where, Jesus ran away to when Herod was, killing all the babies. And so the connection was, hey, if Joseph went in and saved everybody because of his dreams, and then out of that comes Moses and he saves all of his people and leaves, and then Jesus comes down, they're all seeing these pyramids. And so we have this connection to our religious forebears. Absolutely. because we're seeing these same things. And so they wanted that religious connection too.
Well, you actually, it's funny because you lead off the book talking about this, about the idea that, and forgive me, I forget her name, but talking about how you were sitting in the exact same spot as a woman, many years earlier. And there is this idea when you walk around, I remember when I walked around the Old North Church in Boston, I had this quasi-religious experience where I was like, I have to be a historian. This is what I have to. So I get, it's like,
that's what made you want to be a historian, was the Old North Church?
Yeah, I was taking a course. I had this wonderful professor at Wichita State University named Robert Owens, terrific human, amazing scholar, but even better human. And I was taking a course on the American Revolution, and I ducked out for a weekend to go see a friend of mine who lived in Boston. And culmination of, I was reading Paul Revere's Ride by David Hackett Fisher on the plane. Went to go see a high school friend of mine who was living in Boston. Another mutual friend of ours from high school flew up. The three of us got together that weekend, walking around the Old North Church. It was like, dude, this is what I'm supposed to do. Like, I love telling stories, right? It's like, so I get it,
Yeah.
However, one of the things you kind of alluded to this idea that like, well, I'll get a second actually, because I wonder what's the control of Egyptians over their own history. These stories are very similar to that have played out in the United States amongst Native American lands, materials, ancestors, I would assume elsewhere, by colonizing forces. So I'm kind of wondering, in this time period during the 19th, early 20th centuries, do Egyptians have control? Say so? Are they being totally overwhelmed by these French, European, and I guess later on Americans? What's going on here?
So Egyptians are involved in the process, but
Mhm.
as the diggers. So they are very well trained. There's a whole it Europeans are using Egyptians as diggers for most of the 19th century, and they're not letting them in to their fireside chats or to their tea on the terrace, if you will. So they're not inviting them into those chats, so they don't really have much of a say. There was an early Egyptian Egyptologist, Ahmed Kamal, um, and he did a bunch of stuff and wrote in Arabic. And like he was totally revolutionary for doing this because he wanted to communicate the history of his country to Egyptians so they could read it. But it took until the mid 1930s for Egyptians to actually like get get some of the upper echelon jobs at the in the Ministry of Antiquities or in the museum, to be a curator or something like that. And so they were involved as excavators, but they also had their own ideas on what they were pulling out of the ground. And they were talking about those. They just weren't writing them down. Um, so there was a group of guys from the town of Koptos or Guft,
Mhm.
and they're known as Guftis, and they are still some of the most well-trained archaeologists in the world. And Flinders Petrie, in 1894, went and was digging at Guft and trained these guys and was like, you know what? I'm just going to keep training them, and I'm going to take them with me all over Egypt. And 30 years later, James Breasted was bringing them into Syria, to excavate at Megiddo. I think that's in Syria. Or is that in Palestine? I'm sorry if I got it wrong.
How dare you?
I know. I know.
I don't know
So
where I am in Colorado right now,
okay.
so I'm like,
But he brought them there, and so the Guftis, I mean, they are the cream of the crop in terms of excavators. If you're excavating in Egypt, you want Guftis on your squad even today. Um, so, but they're absolutely involved. They have ideas. They're just not the ones that get to write them down and publish them.
man, this feels like almost like Sherpas on Mount Everest.
Yes, yes, that's exactly. That's a great comparison.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, you talked a little bit about this, and so much about this book is pushing back about the idea of great men of Egyptology, things like that. You very pointedly say that it's women who make great men possible
Mhm.
in here. And one of the things you said a little bit earlier about the idea was like, okay, make this place safe for men to come down. I'm wondering, because I really want to center this on women's experience for women like Evie in this film,
Yeah.
what are the challenges that women are facing as they come into Egypt that are maybe different than men, or just what are they encountering as these women? Who first of all, who are these women who are coming into Egypt to
Mm.
do these studies? Are they coming exclusively from England? Are they from the U.S.? Are they from France? Are they from some other space? I know that there are many Egyptologists now. In my mind's eye, Kate, I tend to think of them as English or American or Egyptian, but I assume that there are fine scholars from China and elsewhere. Um, but where are these people coming from, say, during the Gilded Age, and what are they experiencing?
Yeah, so it was first the French and the British,
Okay,
and then after the American Civil War, Americans started coming over more,
okay,
because they had a bit more money and also like they don't have to fight their way through blockades to get over. Um, and so there are French women, I do believe, who are coming down. The one I know the most about is Noble Court, but she was in the 20th century. I don't know that much about French women Egyptologists, not because they weren't important, but because that's just not like where I focused my attention just
sure.
yet. So the ones in the book are Britain and the United States. Um, and like what you said, there are Russian scholars. There are some Japanese scholars who come in. I don't know about Chinese, to be honest, but they probably are. Polish. Currently, Poland has a huge contingent working on Egyptology. Germans. Oh gosh, I can't believe I almost forgot the Germans and Italians. I mean, all over, right? Everybody's in Egyptology. But the main women for the Gilded Age that are in the book and that I know the
Mhm.
most about are the British and the Americans. And the Americans bring in so much money, so much money. Like even back then when the Americans showed up, like in the Mummy movie, do you know when
Mhm.
when they're like shooting their guns on the Thomas Cook boat Sudan
Oh yeah.
and they're having that firefight and Jonathan goes, Americans. It's hilarious for a lot of reasons. One, Egyptians wanted Americans there because they brought in tons of money and they paid very well. And two, of course, because Americans are like firing their guns and having a blast. So that was really perfect. So they bring in loads of money that the British they have like you have Lord Carnarvon, you've got tons of money there, but um Theodore Davis and Emma Andrews, they come in, they're millionaires. Um, so like they have the money to spread around. And when Carolyn Ransom Williams comes in, she's backed by the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which is J.P. Morgan.
Mhm.
And she also has some money from the University of Chicago, which is the Rockefellers. So the Americans bring in tons and tons of money, and at least by excavation crews, they are very welcome because they get paid pretty well.
Are women facing similar challenges in Egypt that they were, say, in the UK or in the United States? I'm talking about, say, restriction of rights,
Mhm.
restriction of personal freedoms. You say coming with money, but does that change like social status or personal liberties? Are they do they have to be accompanied by men? Uh, how are their personal lives as they enter into Egypt and try to navigate these worlds? Not just like Egyptian society, right? But
Yeah.
society of academia, which, as you and I know, is a good beast.
Yeah. So a lot of these women, the ones the ones that came with male partners, it was Emma Andrews and she was it. And she came mainly because she wanted to travel with her partner, Theodore Davis. So she came with a male partner. All these other women came with female partners. Either they were life partners, like they were in love, and so they were partnered
Mhm.
up, they were couples, or it was just like, listen, I don't have a man to go with, so I'm going to find a companion. And if I find a female companion, I know that she's not going to try to overshadow me just because I'm a woman, which is what always happened with men, right? So, Theodore Davis, for example, Emma Andrews was the one who took all of the notes. It's because of her diaries that we have any information about any of his excavations. And he took her notes almost word for word sometimes. Never thanked her, never included her name. Um, and it was like, some people might kind of go, oh, that was the time. So he wasn't going to, acknowledge it. But the more you look at it, the more it's like, I don't know, this has to be deliberate. It has to be deliberate when your partner who is paying for half the excavation gets left off of the site
Mhm.
report. Like
Yeah.
that's on purpose. So when I watch a movie like The Mummy, and I see that, Evie's a librarian and she keeps getting yelled at and all of this stuff. And then Rick comes along and is like, "No, you're the real deal. You're the expert here. Like I'm going to listen to you." It's a whole new thing for her. And of course, I mean, it's Brendan Fraser, so you're going to fall in love with Rick O'Connell, like we all did. Um, but she did so too because he was like, "What does this mean? You're the
Yeah.
expert. You're the one I want to listen to."
Kate, was she falling? And that's my question. As a man who is clearly not good at relationships, is she falling in love with this man because he's actually listening to her? Like it's like, oh wait, your points are valid. You're an expert. You have, or he's pretty. Which is more important? I just need to know for my Hinge profile. So
Yeah. Do you want my personal opinion?
go for it.
It's a good mix of both.
I'm
But
pouring
I
wine.
mean, everybody wants to be heard. Yeah, you're pouring wine now. Everybody wants to be heard. And like Jonathan, her brother, listened to her, loved her.
Yeah.
Um, and I love their interactions too, because he's like, "Hey, would you tell me if I found anything? Obviously,
Yeah.
he sees her as an expert. Um, but, then she says, well, the Bembridge scholars, they rejected my application again because I don't have enough time in the field. And so she's feeling like she's not an expert when clearly she is.
She is.
She's just given her whole CV to the director of the museum and said, here are all the things I do. This is why you put up with me. And then she's like, but they won't accept me. And then you've got this Egyptologist going, what does a woman know? When clearly she knows a lot. So the women who were in the field, it's a
Mm-hmm.
really good comparison, because the women who were in the field at the same time, they were dealing with a lot of this too. But at around the same time, so in 1928, that's when Amos Calverley and Myrtle Broom got a crap ton of money from the Rockefellers to copy the Temple of Seti at Abydos. So speaking of Seti the First, they were working on his thing, right?
Right.
They did it, and Rockefeller said, I will only fund it if Amos Calverley is the one who is directing it.
Really?
Yeah. He was like,
Wow.
she must stay the director of this thing, and
Wait,
then
do
I
I
will
have
give
to
you the
like
money.
Rockefeller now?
Listen, he funded a lot of really good Egyptology stuff. You don't have to like him. You don't have to like him.
I don't not like him. Like the lot of
He
these.
still walked around the desert in wingtips, so
Okay, well, clearly I'm the fashion icon here with like 14 pair of flip flops here. I was at a party this weekend. I'm like, look, there's like bottle openers on the bottom of my flip flops, and then people are like,
Ooh,
you would drink? Oh yeah, I like to party.
fantastic.
It's dude. I'm bringing the beach to Colorado. I don't give a shit. Like these guys out here, they're like, hi, everybody out here is named Todd and they wear flannel. I don't know.
Hey, you get 300 days of sunshine. Wear those flip-flops.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Right? Okay, one of the things you talk about that I found really interesting, though, when we talk about women Egyptologists, is the fact that they're doing different types of work
Mm-hmm.
than the men are. Can you kind of explain, like, how are women engaging in Egyptology? A lot relating to, if I recall correctly, the care
Mm-hmm.
of remains and artifacts. Is that correct? Like, can you talk
Yes.
a little bit about the kind of different roles men and women are inhabiting in this pursuit?
Yeah. So one of the things that really drew me to this, I'm going to close my blinds because it'll actually like put more light on my face,
Ooh, it'll make
which
it more
might
dramatic.
and more. Well, maybe I didn't do that. Okay, sorry. It's dark. The light's coming in from behind me. Um.
It's like a
Anyway,
metaphor now. Go
I
on.
don't have. I don't have one of those ring lights. I'm not fashion.
Ooh,
You
I
know what I mean?
have a ring light, but it's bad because it actually shows my face more. So
Oh.
go on.
So I'll just let my glasses do the talking.
There you go.
They One thing that I talk about in most of my work, I say, if I've got fans out there and they've read a lot of my stuff, what they'll see me say a
I
lot
have.
is there you go. In Egyptology, men do the dirty work, and they don't want women to do it because it's too dirty. And it's just not fit for women to do. They can't do it in a skirt or any of those things. But so there were some women who were doing excavations and they were getting dirty. But a lot of the women were doing the writing, the communicating, they were doing the organizing, they were doing the domestic stuff, right? So they were,
Mhm.
um, when the artifacts would get back to the museum, they would accession them, they would write the lists, they would document everything. They wrote a lot of the scholarship about the artifacts once they got back to the museum, but they weren't writing the site reports, so it didn't seem very exciting. But then you also have these really like famous guys, like Albert Lithgow, um, at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, didn't really write very much. When he died kind of early, and Herbert Winlock wrote to Carolyn Ransom and was like, yeah, he's got so much stuff that he just never wrote up, and he really was upset that he just never got a chance to write up because he was always out in the field.
Sure.
But we know about Lithgow because he was always out in the field. But we don't know about the Bernice Cartlands, who were, these women sitting at these little desks writing all of this stuff down, and writing articles and publishing. But they weren't in the field, so that doesn't seem as exciting.
Sure. You do this thing in the book where you complicate this. And
Okay.
we have to ask this, like, are women part of this colonizing force that are coming in and extracting ancestors,
Yep.
resources, traditional knowledge. How do we think about this? Like, what's the role of women in this colonization? Because we want to celebrate these women for these intellectual pursuits, right? At the same
Yeah.
time, what else is going on here?
They were perpetrators. I mean, they really
Yeah,
were, right? So we sort of talk about them as, oh, they were victims of misogyny. Absolutely.
all
They
the same
were
things, right?
all of it, but also they were then turning around and victimizing Egyptians. They were sort of going, well, they were in this weird part of the hierarchy where they were colonizers, but they were also women. So it's this whole thing of, well, are we above the Egyptian male diggers? And there were some Egyptian male diggers that said, no, you're not, because you're a woman. And so they would, sort of, I'm not going to dig for this person because she's a woman, and that caused problems. um, but then these white women used their power as white women also to get things done. um, so there was I'm glad that you noticed that was in there, because I tried not to be too heavy-handed about it, right? And be like, hey, these women were kind of crappy too, but they were. And what drives me nuts, and I don't know, this probably drives you nuts as a historian, is when people are like, well, but we have to, be understanding because it was part of their time. It was, but also not everybody was in agreement with colonization at the time, so they didn't
No,
have to be jerks about it. You know what I mean?
I tend to think, Kate, in this regard, right? It's just what it does when we show the dark side. That's probably a bit much, right? But when we show that women were engaged in colonization, right, despite the fact that they were trying to overcome these obstacles about womanhood, about their own liberties and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
shows, in my own mind, I think it shows the humanity of women.
Mm-hmm.
That women are not saints just because they're women. The women
Yeah.
we revere are the women who overcome the things, the challenges, whatever challenges they may be, because they are human,
Yeah.
not because of whatever organs they have.
Yeah.
I think in a lot of ways that, like, when we talk about, like, yeah, women are trying to overcome this, yet at the same time are still perpetrating this colonization of Egypt and are participating in the removal of Egyptian ancestors
Mm-hmm.
from their homelands.
Mm-hmm.
It shows us in a lot of ways what it is to be human, and to be human means to have a lot of ups and downs. Like,
Yeah.
this is what this is, and we celebrate the wins. We try to minimize the losses here, and we just go, okay, we could have done better, and
Yeah.
that's why we study, right? We
Yep.
go, okay, well, let's do better in the future now, right? So men and women don't colonize, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Men and women, hey,
Rule
let's
of thumb.
repatriate, right? Totally.
Yeah.
Generally not colonize, right?
Yeah. Don't do it.
All right. We talked about your codfish moment earlier in the film. Are there other moments that, like, you love, just as a film lover, as an Egypt lover, Egyptology lover? God, this is such a fun movie. You watched it
Yes.
recently. Are there moments in this movie you love?
Yeah. Oh, so many. So
It's such a good movie.
Chris Monahan on Twitter today said something like, it was part of a thing, how people go like,
Right.
post a gif of whatever. And so it was,
I'm a
respond to
gift
this
maven.
tweet. Yeah.
It's my
Respond to
love
this.
language.
It is. Oh, my
Right.
phone is full. My phone is over full with gifs.
Love it.
But it was like, respond to this with a gif of a comfort movie that you like to watch. And his was The Mummy. And so he put The Mummy up, and I said, yes, but I responded, I said, yes, I agree with you, but I needed to include Jonathan, because there's the part where they all come up to the base of Anubis,
Mm-hmm.
and it's Rick and Evie and Jonathan, and they've pulled their guns on the Americans. And, Benny says something like, well, there's 4 of you and 14 of me. And Rick says, I've had worse odds. And Jonathan goes, yeah, me too. And then Rick kind of goes and looks at him, and he's like, yeah. I think, okay, and not, this is going to be, I was going to say, not that you, I think, will appreciate this analysis. Like, it's 1926. Jonathan is probably in his early 30s at this point. He fought in the First World War, right? So
I didn't
when he
think about
says, I've had worse odds too, he has. I mean, this
He's
guy
seen the
is,
shit.
yes, he's seen the shit. He's killed people. he's an alcoholic because he's trying to deal with, I say this as you take a sip of your wine, because he's trying to deal because he's trying to deal with what he saw in the trenches, right?
Totally.
Rick was likely a veteran of the First World War also. I mean, and Evie had to watch her friends probably die in this war. So, because the war made it to Egypt. So
I didn't think about that.
they had to deal with all of this stuff. And then when Jonathan's like, yeah, me too, it's a funny moment because Rick's like, whatever, this guy looks like kind of a wimp. He had to have fought in the war. Had to have.
Jonathan has a dark past.
Oh, he totally does. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Like, I was going to go, isn't Arnold Voss so cool? Like the
Yes.
whole thing when he does with his mouth and the eating of the plane.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I have to tell you, and I hate like interjecting myself in my own pod. Like,
No, do it.
The spirit of this film is so perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as heavy as say Indiana Jones, which is like Raiders in my mind is a perfect film. I was saying this last night. But it hits that really sweet, that National Treasure-esque sweet spot of fun. There's a sense of danger, but it's not overwhelming. It's just a fun movie.
Yeah.
The costuming in my mind, like that white shirt on khaki, I'm still trying to like. Have you watched the Yellowstone series, the 1923 series?
No, I haven't.
It's fascinating in a lot of
Okay.
ways. One of the things I love about it is how they address like Indian boarding schools and the trauma behind that. I was like, holy shit. This is really fucking good.
Yeah.
Right? That is awful, right? But the fact that we're bringing this up, and most people who think about like I think non-scholars and non-native folks who haven't had to experience that trauma aren't as familiar with like the trauma of native boarding schools, and that they talk about this, right?
Yeah.
But there's a dude, one of the Duttons, like rocking out the white shirt and the khaki. I'm like, I need to do that. That should be like, I need suspenders. Can we bring suspenders back?
You should.
Okay. Where do I buy suspenders? I will totally rock suspenders.
Men's Warehouse?
I don't know. I'm going to go to Colorado Springs. There's nothing in Pueblo. Like,
okay. Amazon.
You know what's going to happen? All I want to do, I'm going to get suspenders, and I'm going to get that Derek guy, the guy who does with the fashion stuff on Twitter.
Yeah.
That's what I need. I'm like,
tweet
historians.
Put it together. Yeah.
I want to get him on the pod. I want him to do like American Psycho or something like that. Some fashion-y movie.
Oh, speaking of white shirts.
Yeah. All right. Like, you guys stay on the movie? Maybe. I don't know. Are there parts, Kate, of this movie that make you cringe? Is there anything here you don't like in this movie?
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I wrote them down.
First of all, how dare you?
The canopic jars. There's 5 canopic jars in the film. Okay. There's actually only 4 canopic jars in reality. And I think, so there were a couple people that I know that I now know, I didn't know them then, obviously, who were consultants for the film.
Oh, cool.
And they were like, you know, we told them there was only 4, but they wanted 5. And I think they wanted 5 because of the 5 people who were around the chest when they opened it. Because in the second film, they sort of minimize the 5 canopic jars sort of thing, because I think maybe enough people complained or something.
Mm-hmm.
That part bothers me. It shouldn't. Like, oh, does the mummy curse bother you? Absolutely not. What bothers me are the 5 canopic jars.
Do you remember the hoopla? I mean, Tuts was found in what, 22? I think you use that as a marker as one of the golden ages of Egyptology.
Yep.
I remember as a kid, you referenced National Geographic. I remember growing up, like, wasn't that Instagram for us in the 80s?
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And Tut was he was like at least twice a year.
Oh yeah, at least. Because 79 was when he came over, and that's when I'm gonna age myself. That's when I was born. Okay. And so like for the next like 10 to 15 years, it was still all about Tut.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And do we believe in Egyptian curses? Like we see this stuff online all the time, right? Like don't open that. Like we know this already.
Yeah, keep it closed.
You know?
Yeah,
totally.
You know, I don't we don't have the Hamdai, right? Like we don't have this guy who's going to rise up and kill anybody if you bring him back to life by reading this this book with actual hinges. Like that part's not real either. Um,
Should be.
but it absolutely should be.
So cool.
I have a friend who actually collects mummy memorabilia, like from the film. And
hey, remind me to never go to their house. So
he's got a key. He's got all of this stuff.
just from the movie though. Okay, we're okay. All right.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like memorabilia and things like that. So what are you gonna say? Curse? I don't think so. Like I don't even think that there are curses like that are recorded in any sort of like religious writing. There's nothing that's like, oh, if you open this tomb, this thing will happen to you. You don't want to go into a tomb right when it's been opened because the air has been in there for so long that it's stagnant, right? I mean, Theodore Davis fainted in one because the air was so warm and stagnant he just couldn't get breath.
Right.
But because of that, people thought, oh gosh, there's he's cursed or there's a curse or something, and of course when Carnarvon shaved and cut a mosquito bite on his cheek, that turned septic. There's no antibiotics. He dies of blood poisoning, right? Like there is a reason why he died, and it wasn't because of King Tut's tomb.
That's the reason why I have a beard. No shaving. No, no shaving. Blood poisoning. I don't want to have to bust out the leeches on my face. Yeah. We talked so much about The Mummy. There's another film I was wanting to ask you. How do you feel about Stargate?
I have only seen it once.
Okay.
I do like it a lot, though. But I tend to put my energy into The Mummy and Indiana Jones.
Did you watch the Tom Cruise Mummy?
No. Real fans don't.
No,
Jason.
They don't. And okay, so here's what happens, right? I announce we're going to talk about a film. Right, and I say, "Hey, everybody! Kathleen Belew is going to come on to talk about Red Dawn." And people are like, "Are you going to do the stop? Mm-hmm. We're only talking about the the 1980s Red Dawn."
You shouldn't even have to ask.
Thank you. I don't respond back. Like, no, of course we're only doing the real Point Break. Yeah. Right? When we do Roadhouse, we're only doing the real Roadhouse, not that. Okay, so Marshall Teague, who is a wonderful guy, the guy who plays Jimmy, the guy who gets his throat ripped out, he's a wonderful guy. I'm friends with him on Twitter. He's like a legit, really sweet guy. I'm
awesome.
I'm a little worried because he came on. He tweeted with us when we did the live tweet one night, and I'm a little bit like, are you tired of talking about this movie for 35 years?
No way.
Or I'm gonna ask him, like, Marshall, would you come on to do this movie? Like, I don't care. I'm gonna
ask him.
He's actually, here's the great thing. He plays a bad guy. He's the sweetest guy. He tweeted with us one night from a wedding.
Oh.
He was at a wedding and he was live tweeting the movie with us.
It's like Biff Tannen. The guy who played Biff Tannen apparently is a super nice guy, even though he plays a big old bully.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
All right. I want to ask you about your work. Okay. You have a PhD, which for people who don't have one means we are actually superior to you in many other ways. I also have a PhD.
Yes. Cheers to that.
That's right. It's amazing how much better we feel about ourselves as we drink. So helps in so many ways.
It really does.
Are there works, Kate, that have inspired your own work that you really like? And I was talking about this earlier. I think all of us as scholars. And it doesn't have to be directly to say it's the history of Egyptology, but when we think about works that really drive us, that really have inspired, when we read it, we're like, holy shit, this is good. Are there works that you really love?
There are. So Margaret Rossiter's Women Scientists in America, I mean, the OG, Women in Science trilogy, right? Because there's 3 of them by Johns Hopkins University Press. Those are a huge inspiration. And I met Margaret when I was in grad school, and we went out to lunch with her, and there were me and 2 of my colleagues. We were just baby grad students, and she just lined it out for us. She's like, here's what you do. If you can't get a job right after grad school, make sure you have access to a library. If you want to keep going in academia, you need to get that book going. She gave us all this super practical advice. So Margaret Rossiter and those books made me know that I could do this, because she was like, no one else was doing what I was doing. And I'm not special, I found something I thought was interesting and I'm writing about it. But um, her work and her sort of advice on all of that. She's like, just because no one else is doing what you're doing doesn't mean you can't do it. Because here I thought like, oh, I need a lit review. I need people to have done all of this stuff. And it's like, or maybe you could be the person to do all of that stuff. And so her and that stuff. And then, can I just say that one that inspired me because it was so terrible,
Ooh, I like
was, and this is not going to be anybody who's alive right now, was Flinders Petrie's autobiography. And it was so horrible, in so many
Do
ways.
tell. Oh my God. Oh,
Yeah.
This is the first time we've had someone trash another scholar.
Oh,
pour it into my soul.
Okay, I will trash Flinders Petrie
Let's
all
go.
day long. He my master's thesis, my master's thesis at Oklahoma was about his work in eugenics. Like, he was a big time eugenicist. Super racist, really terrible guy. Just, yes, so many
Poor
things
tipper.
wrong. What?
Poor tipper.
But he actually was not a poor tipper.
We know about this?
We do know about this because
I just want to make shit up.
No, in Egypt, it's called bakshish. And so when you are excavating, you pay your diggers, but you also pay them extra if they've done a good job finding a really good piece or making sure that those pieces don't go astray. You say, hey, kind of to incentivize them not to go sell them to other people, you pay them extra. And so Petrie was a very good bakshish kind of guy.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, whatever.
So there's that. But he was bad at everything else.
Thank you.
So
did he call his mother? I don't think so.
No, he probably didn't.
Okay, good.
He did, though, however, I had to look this up on the page because when I was working on my thesis about him, I read his autobiography because I'm like, does he say anything about eugenics? He didn't. But he did mention on page 199, he said, as the bottom half as the last half of this sentence, he said, Miss Murray, my colleague, came to help with the Assyrian. That was the only time he mentioned this woman named Miss Murray in his autobiography. And I sort of noted that in my brain. I was like, I wonder who she is. Gonna look at it later.
That's the best thing, so.
Then I finished my master's thesis and I needed something to do my PhD on. And so I was like, who is this Miss Murray? Well, turns out it was Margaret Murray. She gets a chapter in Women in the Valley of the Kings. I wrote a biography of her. That was my PhD dissertation in my first book. She worked with him for almost 70 years. Like,
get the out.
No, I will not. And he included her once in his autobiography. He gets a whole chapter in her autobiography. And it's insane. The work that she did for him and with him and because of him and around him and in support of him.
A single line.
Yes. Less than a single line. It was half of a sentence. It was after a comma.
Can I embarrass you for a second?
Okay.
Okay, here's what I love about your book. I want to say this real fast, okay? Because I am really bad about taking compliments. I'm about to compliment the shit out of you for a second, okay?
Okay.
Here's one of the cool things about your book. It is so easily readable. And by this, I mean I can pick up a chapter and read about an amazing woman, and then I can put it down, right? And I can go do whatever, and then I come back to it. It's like the stories are interconnected, right? As we move the field forward and things like that. But I feel like it's just this cool thing where you're talking about all these women, but it's also like I can read about this one woman, and I'm got a self-contained story.
Yeah.
And then I can move forward. And I was like, this is cool. And I've seen it done a couple other times, a couple other books that I really liked. It's a narrative device that I really dig.
Thank you.
Go buy the book, everybody. I mean, it's what I'm saying. I just think I just wanted to interject that and tell you how much I dug the way you wrote the book.
Thank you.
I have another very serious question. This comes up to the second section of the pod. I didn't prep you on this one. I forgot to put this on the thing. We have another segment helped coined by our friend Lauren Lesap Sheppard, who is an amazing scholar.
I follow her on Twitter. Yeah, she's fantastic.
Lauren has become one of my best buddies. I just love her to death. She is amazing. I just love her to death. Lauren, if you're listening to this, I can embarrass you too. We love you too. Lauren's first pod, we came up with a section called What the Florida. So I'm wondering what happens if we set the mummy in Florida. Who's the bad guy? What happens if we set the mummy in Florida?
Okay, this is gonna be fun.
I'll go for it.
So is it in 2024 or are we
Yeah.
like 100 years ago?
Dr. Sheppard, this is your narrative. It's your story. You're the screenwriter of What the Florida of the mummy in Florida, the peninsular mummy. Go ahead.
The peninsular mummy.
The swamp
Okay.
mummy.
Okay, the bad guy. I mean, listen. We all know who the bad guy in Florida is. Well, there's two bad guys, I
Tell me.
guess.
There's multiple.
There's two main bad guys I'm thinking of, and maybe it's like I've got it. So the bad guy, right, is the mummy is Trump, and then his Benny, his supporter. That's DeSantis, right?
Oh, I love it. Go on.
Right, because it's better to be in what is it? It's better to be something with the devil than to be in his path or something like that. It's better to be at the right hand of the devil than to be in his path.
Right, that's how he justifies it, right?
Yes. So that's the two of them. And like, why can't, like, I think that, you know, O'Connell and the Carnahans and of course Ardeth Bay, because you'd never get rid of Ardeth Bay. A guy who can handle a sword like that.
Can we talk about him? He gets overlooked. Yes. Yeah. That dude's awesome. You know, the second he showed up in this film, he was like, oh, that guy's cool.
Yes.
Right?
When he like gets the match struck on the side of his face and just kind of looks over, like that was no big deal. I don't know. Have you ever tried to strike a match on the side of your face?
I was literally looking around to see if I have matches. I have.
It's going to hurt. Don't do it.
I have Cuban cigars over there. Okay. But like, can I tell you, whenever I do partake in my really bad cigar habit, I just use a candle lighter.
Not a strike anywhere match.
I'm so lame.
No, that's not lame. You're saving your face because you would get cuts all over your face.
I think it'd give me some character. But go on.
Probably.
Also, he has a sword.
He's got a sword, a massive sword. He's got tattoos all over his face. I mean, he's the only guy who gets face tattoos. I'm sorry.
Yeah, he rocks. He rocks like he can pull that off, and Maori people can pull it off.
Oh yes, very true. Yep. Sorry. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Right, those guys. And there's like, there's a country where if you get your PhD, they give you a sword.
Is it Saudi Arabia?
No, it's one of the Scandinavian countries. You get healthcare and a sword. Yeah.
I don't have a sword.
I don't have a sword either. And you got your PhD in Oklahoma. You're lucky they didn't give you a sidearm. Like you probably could have. They could have given you a 6-shooter, right? I also have sidearms. Shotguns and rifles galore in here, right? I'm a gun-toting liberal. I'm like, let's go. I'm just full of.
We were driving. We were cracking up yesterday because we were driving to a nearby town for dinner last night, and we drove by this guy, like, because we're out rural area, and we drove by this guy's farm.
You're in the rural area of Missouri, really?
And so he's holding a shotgun and just looking up at the sky. And we were like, what is he even doing? The weird thing was not that he was holding a shotgun, is that he was looking up at the sky. We're like, what is he about to shoot? That was the question.
UFOs, obviously.
Probably. Yeah, or I think there were birds flying around.
Which brings us to our next question. Did the aliens build the pyramids?
I always tell my students, I'm like, absolutely
not. Don't you fucking ask that question.
If you read, you wouldn't be asking the question. No, I mean, we know this. But also, slaves did not build the pyramids. It was Egyptians. They paid the Egyptians because they were skilled workers.
Yeah, you don't build that. A thing that lasts thousands and thousands of years, right?
Not with forced labor, no.
Wow. It's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
All right, we've hit all of our high points here. We've hit all of our low points as well.
Yes.
I'm going to come back to our final question, Kate.
Oh.
Is The Mummy a history movie?
I think so. Okay. I love this question. I just wrote a line. I just wrote a line down with an arrow and I put yes. It is because it's fantastical, of course. The second one is much more fantastical than the first. I want to go back because we were talking about Ardeth Bay, and my favorite thing about him, two things. One, in the second film, when he shows up and his line, he says something like, because when Alex like shows the bracelet, he's like, oh, I put the bracelet on, and he holds it up. He goes, you started a chain reaction that could bring about the next apocalypse. and just says it. And this poor 9-year-old kid goes like that. And then of course Brendan Fraser goes, what did he say? He said, you get in the you lighten up, you big trouble, you get in the car. And then they all go get in the car. It's like the best little part there. But also how protective he is of the O'Connells when they need him. So that's really good too. And you've got like all of these men in this film who are very tough, like physically very tough. They are very capable, but they're also very caring. And you don't see that a lot. I mean, you see that in Lord of the Rings, I think, and you see it in The Mummy, but a lot of times, you see these sort of very masculine men and we can't feel things, but like they obviously do.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I think
interesting.
I think that's why Fraser's so good in this. I think this may be Fraser's best film,
Yeah.
right? Or his best. I mean, he's had a renaissance, and I've always really liked him as a human. I remember him in Encino Man, and he did a bunch of stuff. But this is really it's kind of weird. It's like he had this weird fall, and he had some issues with his body shape, and he put on a bunch of weight and stuff like that. And this is not to criticize that. It's not what I'm about. But it did have an effect on his ability in Hollywood. I think Hollywood it's well known for being very body conscious, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
The casting in this is so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yet when I think about this movie, I can't help but think about this is in so many ways Rachel Weisz's film.
Yeah.
I think which really kind of testifies to your own book. I mean, it's like she's the part of the story, and so much like Raiders of the Lost Ark, like where Marion sticks out so well because she's such an answer.
Yeah.
To Indy. And she's such a compliment, and I mean this in the best, like the opposite. She's the part that Fraser's character, that O'Connell needs.
Yes.
And she needs him to get to this next level. I dig it, and shows a strong winner there, and it's fun. God, I love this movie. So
that was I went a little bit backwards, but yes,
please.
I do. So I do think that it's a history movie for a few reasons. One, I think that anything that makes people interested in a topic is good, right? I mean, if it's a war film, if it's a mummy film, whatever it is, if you kind of go, or National Treasure, right? If you go, hey, I want to know more about the Declaration of Independence. So I'm going to go look up some things about the Declaration of Independence. This really fantastical film brought you to that interest and made you want to learn more. And that's what matters. You know what I mean?
Thank you for saying that.
I will never shit on films that are fantastical like that when it brings people to a discipline or to questions that they have. You know what I mean? And so I do think it's a history film because it brings people into the fold. And it also there's a lot of accurate stuff in there. With the boat that they're on, the Sudan was a famous Thomas Cook steamer. And so people would take this boat from Cairo and they would go up the river to Luxor, off into Aswan, but you could get off wherever you wanted. It never burned down in the middle of the river. It lasted for a really long time. So that part was incorrect. But like this idea that you're getting on this boat and you're meeting people, you're playing cards, you're talking about where you're going next. You're making bets with your life and never your money. So these are things that like, they were real. These were real things that real people did. And I think they did a great job of showing a lot of that. And it demonstrates the need for nerds in an action film. One of the like big things right before sort of the climax, right? Evie is trying to figure out where the Book of Amun-Ra is. She's reading all of these hieroglyphs, right? She's the one solving the problem. It's not Rick with his guns. It's not Ardeth Bay with his wonderful, wonderful swords. It's her reading, like.
Yeah.
And I love because she's like, patience is a virtue. And Rick turns to her and goes, not right now, it isn't. I love that part. I die every time. It's the best.
Oh, the chemistry between them is just, this is in so many ways, I can't help but think, Kate, it's a perfect movie.
It is.
It does exactly what it's supposed to do.
Yes, it does.
And I think you're absolutely right. This idea that anything that draws us in that makes us ask questions.
Yeah.
Like, that's a plus. And we know going in, this movie does not take itself seriously, which I think is to its credit.
Yeah.
But then we could say, and also looking back, why do we continually come back to like Egypt? Why are these people so important?
Yeah.
Right, to our civilization, and then like do other countries find Egyptian civilization, history, culture just as fascinating? What does that mean?
Yeah.
Um, I dig it, man. And so, like I said, when I saw that your book was coming out, I had like, "Hey, we got to do this!" Like, and thank
I'm
you
so
so
glad.
much. Are you kidding me? I was like,
Yeah.
this has been on the calendar for so long. It's been on our calendar for. We booked it. I think we started talking about this like 6 months ago.
We did. Yeah,
Like,
we did.
this is so much to where when we were scheduling this, I was like, "Hey, when are we doing this again? Did I send you an invite?"
Yeah, that's right. You're like, did you get one of those? I'm like, I
Are
haven't, but I'm
we
ready.
still
I'm ready.
good?
Let's go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So, and then also, this has been so much fun just to be able to sit and talk to you for the very first time, like
Yeah.
face to face. God, this is great. So, thank you so much for being here. This was
Thank
blast.
you.
I'm so excited. So, I can't
Yeah.
wait for people to hear this. So, and read your book. So, thanks for being here. This was so much fun.
Yes, likewise. And I'm always available for a Mummy too, but I will never do the Dragon Warrior
We're not.
one.
You can't take Rachel Weisz out of the story. And I love
No.
Maria Bello.
Same.
Love her. She was
Same.
great in ER.
Oh
Like, I
yeah.
loved her in ER. Right.
She's fantastic.
You
But
cannot
not.
take her out of series. Listen,
No.
I felt like, you know what you had to do? Throw every amount of money at her
Yeah.
to make her come back for the third one, because she's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
And now she's married to James freaking Bond.
Uh-huh. Daniel Craig. I know.
Rachel Weisz, yeah, just amazing. But no, we're doing that, and we're doing Raiders. We have to do Raiders.
Perfect.
Like, Raiders is yours. We're getting your posse. We're getting your people from
Yes.
from London. I'm seriously, when you and I hit stop here, we're gonna start planning that out. So
Okay, we will.
awesome. Okay, so much fun. Thank you.
Thank you.